I'm talking about applied building research. It is about the restoration of restorations, and a part of it which is the research of reconstructions. I can only talk about one segment of this area, especially from the medieval ages that I'm dealing with, and besides this, all kinds of routine exercises or tasks connected to research. And I can present a few examples about this field. At the beginning, the main characteristics of this area should be presented. The older the building is, the more complex the history of the building is. And the more we work with it and more we approach it, more and more information can be gained. So research is a never-ending job in the case of a monument building. It never finishes. On the other hand, it is also very important, the approach. We can also approach to other creations of culture, pieces of art or literature. These creations are always used there. They are used all the time. And the need for changes make it possible and make it necessary to create for us the different steps of research. There is a big difference as for the categories of monuments. There are some top monuments which are owned by the state. They are very important, and first of all, they are important for cultural, touristic point of view. Of course, the research in this case is different. It happens that from time to time we have to reinterpret the building itself. And we have to work out a concept from the base, from the foundation. It is very characteristic in our region, then all over Europe. And we don't have to explain this in Europe. There are demolition phases when these historical monuments become ruins. They are left abandoned. Think of our big Hungarian castles. In the case of these buildings, the reconstruction is the point, because the original used the soundness of the building was lost. Compared to this, from a demolition situation or condition, it has to be reconstructed. It is a very special segment in monument protection, but it is very characteristic of top monuments because we speak about significant demolition. But on the weekdays, it's not reconstruction is the most adequate expression for the interventions, but minor or bigger renovations which are connected to the use of the building. There is a comparison. Monument protection, the historical monuments always represent some sort of values, but not the way, we cannot use it the way that we present them once. We don't always know what they include. We can get to know about their contents gradually. These values will always be there in the historical monument. These are renewable values. Every generation, every new visitor will face these values and will be able to interpret these values for themselves. This knowledge that we have, or the values, this treasure box, we want to pass on to the future. We protect them by law, and we create all kinds of institutions to protect these buildings. Every research will unearth some new values about the building, but also the old values will be present. Well, research and protection is shared between the private owners and the public owners. These values are not always freely available for everyone. So what can the owner do? What is the responsibility of the owner? The first responsibility is that from this unit, nothing can be lost. This is the owner's responsibility. But the society and the state has a lot more jobs in the preservation of values, considering these values. The state has to support the research of these buildings to find these original, authentic values. And also, they have to support the special conditions of use of these buildings. This old building, an old building like that, needs very special treatment. Considering research, we also have to speak about the training of researchers, which the state has to support. Today it is not really present in Hungary, but they have to register, the state has to register those researchers who have the right to carry out research work. As opposed to the holistic renovation or reconstruction, there is a minimalist approach that we can accept. The primary aims of applied building research. If we touch something, we have to understand it well. We mustn't add anything that might be misinterpreted later on. We have to understand these values. Parts are not to be demolished, which are important for the value, for the point of view of the value of the building. Then the research has to, and of course it has to achieve some sort of result. We have to word the values, and whatever we add to the building, it mustn't be of a lower level than the original level. We are not talking about a theoretical field, but a rather practical field which has very concrete connections to the building. In the first part of my lecture, I am going to talk about, though it is not, of course, a complete picture that I want to show, but I'm showing details about a research, a earlier research, and I would like to present the different situations of these researches. But then I would like to show you examples which will show that whatever research there is, it can change our knowledge about a certain building compared to the knowledge that we had earlier about these buildings. These are going to be medieval ruins. This is the Chestnut Castle, where I worked for several times as a researcher, and I'm showing reconstruction mistakes or warts to you which weren't presented earlier. This is the Eastern Tower. These are the console beams that were built there in 1993, 1994. But they were only a supporting system, but this is how you can see it now. But originally they didn't look like that. In the 1980s, when there were reconstructions as well, practically these works were done without the supervision of researchers. And I will show you one part. They reconstructed a wide gate there, and during the archaeological work it was a lot narrower, and it was not a door, but it was a window. But since there was no correct research, they couldn't create it like that. This is the western gate, western entrance of a cloister. The gate reconstruction was put together out of 3 different pieces. There were 3 different levels there, and this structure was reconstructed the way that they didn't have enough number of stones to reconstruct. And though these stones didn't fit, it didn't disturb the builders who reconstructed this gate. The missing stone elements were replaced with bricks. And this is how it was reconstructed in 2010. We also left something to do for the future, because when we made the cover, then we weren't present, and according to the documentation, a rather illogical ground plan was created in this paving. The next example is one castle wall part in Veszprém. Only this documentation was left about the reconstruction in 1970. You can see that it is, there are a lot of New Age openings which were walled up then, and there are shooting places on the top of the wall, but there is no information, more information about this in the documentation. This wall looks like that now. What is disturbing is that it is a rather uneven work, and the reconstruction is going to take place in the near future. We would like to create a unique image or unique look of this part of the wall. And of course it means that new documentations have to be made. My next example is in Aszófő. That's a church. At the end of the 1950s, the first researches were made, and the work about it was published in 1960. On the one hand, it shows in drawings like that, with gray, it is indicated that these are the reconstructions that he made then. But the only one in situ console was replaced with a simple stone cube. But it is misleading because it has become so much similar to the original consoles. It is a problematic point now in the reconstructions that there is a very authentic original console there, but out of the same stone, the replacements were also made, but they are eroded. They have been eroded so much that it is difficult to say that if these consoles come from the Middle Ages or were added later. This is the western wall, and the reconstruction of the gate arch. It is not indicated where the earlier parts were connected to these walls. Some extra information that was found. At that time, he didn't know this picture, though 20 years before that it was published. You can see how the two parts of the tower were connected or joined. So he reconstructed a plain joining, and according to the photo that was made earlier, it can be justified that he was wrong how he reconstructed the wall. And he said that this is the earliest photo of the ruin, but it means that he didn't know this very early photograph of the wall part. Just a practical point of view, our research results have to be turned into an evaluation and a proposal as well. And we work with different evaluation levels which conclude or include our proposals as well. This is a kind of a Dutch type of evaluation. It is a very good summary of what kind of evaluation we can give and what kind of proposals can be connected to our evaluation. If there is a significant adding to the building where we also have to carry out the evaluation, just like in the case of an Ossofur church, I made a two-grade evaluation. I tell some sort of information about the monument reconstruction as for the old times, and also I added a two-grade evaluation connected to the Zador evaluation, and I point out what the problematic reconstructions are. And finally, in this example line, I would like to point out the new research methodology by which we can get new results. It's not just new information, and meaning that we go there again. This is in Transylvania, this new Reformed church. It can be seen, the geometry of the western part can be seen pretty well. There was a very strong change in the building phases above this level that I'm showing. So we could start the research of traces which led to consequences that this western part when this western part was reconstructed, a new concept was accepted. In the second half of my lecture, those who were here last year as well, because I'm sorry, but I'm going to repeat a few of my last year's lecture as well. It was a very important thing. I learned a lot. This statement, which I'm quoting from a German building researcher, if you take the professional literature which is available, the available information, they put together a basic topographic definition which is available for the public, then whatever detailed research is carried out on the building will override certain parts of this definition. He refers to the German topography. In Hungary there are different topographies and registers. I will mention a few when I show you these examples. I will compare the topography, the topographic description and how it is modified based on the results of building research. This is a 1950s book about historical monuments in Pest County. They define the building as an eclectic building. This is the Igrani Mansion. If you see it from the valley, it looks a historic look. It has a historic look. This is all that they knew before a detailed research was carried out on it. But when I walked around the building, on the other side, on one facade, late Baroque arched windows were found with wrought iron bars. And in it, there are two letters there, V and P, which can also be seen on the bricks in the attic. And when I found the documentation in the archives, that it turned out that a family called Veres were the owners of this mansion, and Peter Veres then had a own mansion built for himself. So we could identify that this building is a lot earlier than it was thought, and this description is of course modified. Before I arrived, the plaster was removed from the wall. You can see the traces of a fireplace. This is the Reformed Church in Nagyszékely. It is a very specific place. Two churches are built together, a medieval church and a tower or church built in the 19th century. So they thought that this tower was kind of late Baroque. It was enough to go up to the upper floors of the tower so that they could find these openings. So as up to the top of the tower, it was a Gothic church. This is a building protected locally in Vác, and it's a historic building and shows a historic appearance. And when the inside of the building was researched, we found doors which obviously show a 18th century reconstruction, 18th century construction. It is even a lower part in the level of monument protection. This is a small building in Tiszaföldvár, which was to be pulled down. But fortunately, we could do some local research and document what we found. And during the painting research, we found a ceiling which was partly painted and partly carved. And we found a decoration from the 18th century. A next example, how the research, the topography is redefined and rewritten. This is the mansion in Kiskunhalas. We can see that it was built around 1840, then it was extended, and so on and so on. And currently, it is operated as an exhibition hall. If you study the documents which could be researched in the local archives, we find the documents, the letters, and the building diary. In 1980, there were minimum interventions there, and it could fix the condition of the building, but later the roof structure was pulled down. In the building diary, we cannot find information about that, but in 1986, this is Roman András's letter, where he gives an account of the local supervision, and they were shocked that the protected building was completely pulled down. So it seems that the original building was completely demolished, and this building is newly built as a copy of the old building. It was not found, or it couldn't be found in the topography. And two more churches, which I did local research of. This is a Gothic origin Reformed church. Significant inner parts were researched or could be researched and explored. According to the monument register, we can read that it was reconstructed and rebuilt several times, but then we found other documents from 1807 where it is written how the complete roof structure was reconstructed, and it turns out the wooden ceiling, for the wooden ceiling, wooden arches were also made. Inside you can see a inner arch there, which is at the top of the Gothic wall. It was a recent heightening. We had a look at the facade of the tower. It was built in 1773. In 1873, it was just as tall, as high as this, and later it was heightened. And you can see the bricks. It is a very special situation because every brick bears the year when it was made. And these bricks come from the beginning of the 1800s, from the 1800s, which and this shows that the reconstruction and renovation was done for the first time at that time. This is a similar example in the monument registry. There were renovations, and there were big renovations in 1802, 1810, and 1823, but we can find more detailed information in the local registers. Now, below the eastern part, we found older walls, where we also found the place of a window which was walled up. The back part of the church was actually they wanted to pull back the complete back part of the church. This is what you can see here. Yeah, on the eastern side, at the lower part, the walls are a lot thicker than in the other parts. This supervision was also carried out once, and we studied the documents, and this is what we found about the history of this church. It is not yet in the topography. And as a summary of the knowledge that we have gained out of this research work, from time to time, it has a character that this has to be renewed from time to time, especially those which are connected to the use of these historical monuments. Thank you very much for your...
What about the material of that west console? And
in the 13th century, or around the 13th century, second half of the 13th century, we suppose based on the columns and based on the written documents, maybe around 1270 or 1280, and it was built out of stone. Sorry. We can see the walls of the tower inside. There was a wall research on a very small surface. We only know the information about the tower. No, sorry. The tower, basically, I don't have an inner photo of the tower. The lower part of the tower was built mostly brick, but how the windows were walled up.
This shape is very characteristic. Andrzej Tomaszowski was dealing with it and wrote his essay. And we found a similar one in Bodrog-Szemes, where we cannot see the apsis, but it can be revealed that the bricks were almost of the same size, so the same workshop must have built it, and it can be connected to Karcsa second period, because the same type of gate was found, and with the sonda it could be revealed that it was built with the wall system. So we think it is the 13th century or perhaps the end of the 12th century. But it's the question of debate.
Here, the comparative example was the Bonszida Church, which also had a Western gallery. The publication of this church could be read in this year's In Situ magazine, and there are summed up the result which concerns this church. About dating, it is
on it how good it is if different lecturers take part in the summer course as long as possible. And I would like to provoke Mr. Sajtos that the results and the scenes of the research, where would you get involved in it? Where do you think it would be interesting for you to take part in it, and how good it would be to look at it and make research on it, on structural?
So this is a provoked question. Actually, I have a few thoughts about that, which could continue your lecture. So I always think of supporting structures as a professional. Those historical researches which appear in connection with demolition and reconstruction, does it turn out what the reason for the demolishing was? Why the roof was made steeper? I didn't have any examples of this kind. Only how steeper it was made, I cannot justify. It is possible, but I'm asking it, or I'm telling it, because the flatter or steeper roof structure, it is just a formal thing, but it regulates the pressure from the side. Because there are a lot of other factors which influence it. If there is an arch there, it is impossible to build in beam structures like that. What I'm saying is that some kind of approach of this kind, which later might prove or give some sort of information about the supporting system, it would be great for our profession. Without any particular special examinations. There are certain situations where a plan has to be modified, and there it turns out that it was carried out due to static reasons. From my own practice, I can say I cannot say any examples of the kind. One example is the St. Michael Church in March the 15th Square and in Vác, and the foundation was researched. According to the written documents, written sources, it seems that they didn't find it safe enough, so they finished the work. But then the insecure parts were walled up. There is a basement church there, but you can see that the different openings are walled up, and it seems that for different reasons, static reasons or groundwater, due to groundwater problems, they will give up the reconstruction of the church in the basement. And just quickly, I'm telling you, this is not the original sanctuary of the church. Only one Gothic door was opened up in the northern wall. And there, at the same time, they could find the sanctuary of the earlier time.
Professionally, it was very interesting, and to learn that there were mistaken reconstructions, faulty reconstructions. Are they just remarks, or there are some initiatives to repair, to eliminate these problems? So
well, of course, a planning is in progress. We always make very defined proposals. But in the case of the Csesznek Castle, for example, it was a building. There is no specific deadline, so nothing has been done with it for several decades. And in the other examples, there were aimed interventions, and they could be included into the documentation towards the designer. We have to be very, very determined about the correction of these faults that you mentioned. Unfortunately, there are no new topographies. Well, we have to say that there is no demand for new topographies. What I can do is that I pass on my documentation to the public registries where anybody can deal with them. They will be available and they can read about my evaluation and my proposals.
During the research of the church, what kind of experience did you get about the state of the tower and the mobile servicers? What kind of damages have they done? We have seen lots of churches, but everybody is silent about what kind of damages are done by the mobile servicers.
For the second point, I don't have direct experience, so I cannot say anything about it because I haven't been to a church where mobile facilitators did any damage or where there was a relay station. especially where, well, I researched several churches in Transylvania where there was a different level, a specific level for the bell out of wood, a bar structure takes down the structure of the bell supporting system to the walls, to the actual stone.
A very brief one. Just very. Didn't you see at the console those parts, because there were arches and sawtooth friezes?
Practically there was no war research in these examples. I made a evaluation documentation about this church. The evaluation documentation was carried out, which I did. And following this, following the first results, the restorers who were working in the neighborhood came over and did some war research, and they supported my supposed opinion, but that was only some interior research there.
Thank you very much. And you are given this study book, and hopefully you will join it. And this publication shows how many branches are connected to architecture can add their own value. Sometimes we see the details in periods, and we don't. Sometimes we forget what kind of initiatives were there behind which caused these changes. So we have lots of